اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear beloved friends, brothers and sisters, welcome to our weekly discussion on Fiqh al-Buyu'. Right now we're reading Adur al-Mukhtar and we are on the passage where the Musannif begins to talk about what is included in a sale and what is not included. So he says, وقال المصنف رحمه الله رضي عنه الأصل أن مسائل هذا الفصل مبنية على قاعدتين إحداهما ما أفاده بقوله كل ما كان في الدار من البناء المعنى كل ما هو متناول اسم المبيع عرفا يدخل بلا ذكر، وذكر الثانية بقوله أو متصلا به تبعا لها دخل في بيعها، يعني أن كل ما كان متصلا بالبيع اتصال قرار وهو ما وضع لا لأن يصله البشر دخل تبعا وما لا فلا. Up here he's talking about and he's discussing this whole principle of what is included in a sale. This entire bab rests upon urf. So the aslul bina up here and this entire basis of this discussion is urf. And he gives two principles which are also dependent upon urf and the understanding of the people. He mentions two principles. There's a third principle that comes further on, right, which is then discussed by the commentators and other fuqaha, that the first principle is, and what we're talking about here is, what is naturally included in a sale. So if you buy something from somebody, what is implicitly, inherently included in that? That's the discussion. Why is that discussion so important? It's important because if you don't explicitly mention a part or piece of an item, then is that included? Because if the seller was not to deliver that to you along with the rest of the item, the question arises, do you have a legal claim? And this is what urf is about. Urf is not about social custom. Urf is about those practices which have a legal implication. That's what urf is about. So for example, if the custom of our tribe or people is that whenever somebody comes to your house, you should offer them tea. And if you don't offer them tea, then it's, you've gone against the etiquettes and manners of our tribe or community or society. And so if I was not to offer you tea when you were my guest and me as your host, although that is disrespectful against etiquette, good manners, but you don't have a legal claim against me. So that's not the urf the fuqaha are talking about. The urf the fuqaha are speaking of and referring to in the books of fiqh, discuss and give attention to, is that urf which brings about a claim where you can go to a court and have your rights fulfilled because of the urf. So for example, if I put as your host food in front of you, what is that considered? Is that idhn? Is that permission for you to now eat? If the urf of that being deemed to be permission to eat and thereafter you were to eat that food, I cannot lay claim and claim damages against you and say that you did halak of my, or you consumed my wealth, or you did ghasab of my wealth, and therefore I'm making a claim against you. Because the urf is when you place food in front of somebody, that is deemed to be idhn in the urf, amongst the people, this customary practice. However, if it was not urf, and I just had some food in front of you, I just put it there, but there's no such indication or idhn from my side that you can consume that food, and you were to consume it, then I can have that remedied and have you repay me for the damage that you've caused me. So that's why urf is about this idea of legal implications. It's about what can be included or at least demanded from the counterparty if they don't fulfill. And so the easy way to understand urf is everything that forms part of a contract, even though it's not explicitly mentioned. Urf is the unwritten laws. That's what urf is. It's as simple as that. You have written laws and you have unwritten laws. Everything that is explicitly mentioned in the contracts, in agreements amongst people, those are written laws. Urf refers to the unwritten laws, those ideas, concepts which are implicitly part of the contract, however, they're unwritten, yet they can be demanded and called for because they're implicitly in the contract because of being ma'ruf. That's why they say, al-ma'ruf kal-mashrut. That's what this principle means. Then the ma'ruf is like mashrut because the mashrut is tasrih. It's there explicitly. The ma'ruf is dalalatan in the contract. So that's what this whole discussion, this whole section is just referring to this idea and concept that what is included in a sale item and what can be demanded, what can be claimed, what does one party have to deliver. Okay, so there's three, you could say three areas or three categories of this. Number one is everything which the name of the item. So if I'm selling you a house, whatever the house incorporates naturally, the word house. Again, house is a word, but the urf, because it's not defined. So what brings definition? Urf brings definition. Many a time when you have words in Sharia which do not have definition, especially in mu'amalat matters, when they don't have definition, urf gives definition, urf gives meaning, urf gives restriction, urf brings specification. So, for example, up here, as Imam al-Haskafi has clearly mentioned, المعنى كل ما هو متناول اسما مبيع عرفا. The word, we're not looking at the linguistic meaning up here. The linguistic meaning would be a haqiqa in lugha, right? But we're looking now at the haqiqa in urf. What is this understood in practice, in business, or in trade, or in this property trades? What is considered to be part of this item? That is what's deemed to be part of the sale item here. So whatever, number one, the word encompasses, automatically its parts will be included. So a dar is a sum of its parts. A house is a sum of its parts. All the parts which are included naturally when you say the word house, so the windows, the door, the bricks, everything is included, even if you don't mention these items independently. Implicitly, they're in the contract. Even though just the word property is mentioned, everything that encompasses or is within a property is included. That's the first principle he gives. Right? So that's the first asal. The second asal he brings is أو متصلا به تبعا لها دخل في بيعها. This idea that everything which is muttasil ittisal qarar. Everything which is there, some almost temporary. It's not sorry, almost permanently. Something which is there, you could say, part of the fixtures and fittings of the asset or the item or that property or that commodity or good. It's there, ittisal qarar. It's there for the long term. It's not something which is, a short-term thing or something which people typically remove and take off and use elsewhere. No, it's deeply connected to that item, and therefore you do not deem it to be independent or separate, or it's not something which people would typically remove, like trees which are planted long term as part of a land. If you sell the land, the trees are naturally included. However, again, that's part based on urf. Okay, how do you define this? What's ittisal qarar? What isn't? Is down and how people understand things, right? And then the third scenario is, or the third asal is whatever is min حقوق المبيع ومرافقها, which he'll mention in a few moments. That will be only included in the sale item if you explicitly mention, or else not. It will not be included otherwise. That needs to be mentioned. Now, why is that the case? It's because the more remote you go from the sale item, like the huquq and marafiq, they are not inherently attached. These are, you could say, peripheral matters and are remote to the actual sale item. You can have the sale item without those things. It's not, if you were to sell a property or a mabi or a dar, without the huquq and marafiq, people will still assume that to be a sale of dar. Okay? Because it's not, whereas if you were to sell a dar without the bricks, nobody would deem that to be a sale of dar or property, because these parts are inherently part of the sale item. So there's like a spectrum that's built up here, and it's been presented to us that whatever is, number one, the closest circle is something having the name of the mabi. That is inherently, it's part of the core. Secondary is the second ring, you can say. The outer layer is anything which has ittisal qarar. Again, it's very strongly connected to the sale item. When you visualize the sale item, that is naturally pictured with it because there's ittisal of qarar there. So it's like an additional feature, but you almost deem it to be one because of the strong link and connection. Then there's these things which float around, which are really remote. These huquq and marafiq, they're there, they're add-ons, they're benefits, but it's not necessarily that. Nobody would deem their absence to be an absence of the sale of the property. So benefits, additional benefits. So for example, classically, you'd have these huquq of shirb, huquq of ard, these roads, right? Rights to water that would be flowing and rights to different paths leading up to your property. These were additional matters, right? They were extrinsic to the sale item, extrinsic to the property, but yet enough to be deemed and to be considered in urf, depending on the strength of its understanding of the people at that time. Okay, so that's all that's being discussed here. And so he mentions up here, لا لأن يفصله البشر. Okay, if something is connected to the land, but however, it's not ittisal qarar. So the fuqaha give many examples. They mention stuff like trees or structures built on land. However, if somebody simply dug something in the ground and placed it in the ground, which people put in the ground as junk or a treasure chest or something along those lines, it's not deemed to be ittisal qarar. It's munfasil, and therefore it's not part of a sale item. So that's where the disputes arise. If an item was like that sold, and somebody found something in their land which is typically not ittisal bi qarar, it's not like fixed to the land, then it's not part of the sale item. So then, like we mentioned, trees. However, they mentioned crops. What about crops? Crops, the fuqaha mention, this is not ittisal qarar. This is this is infisal, or the ittisal up there is for infisal. It's there to remove. It's not there for qarar purposes. But a person will remove this. Typically, what will happen is those things are used for to be removed and to be used by people. So the objective is not for it to remain attached to the sale item. So you have crops and these things which are typically removed. They will not be part of the sale item unless you specifically mention them to be. That's the idea in that. And then he says, فَيَدْخُلُ الْبِنَاءُ الْمَفَاتِيحِ الْمُتَّصِلَةِ. So he mentions, look, these property keys, even the keys to the property, because these are part and parcel of the sale item, right? They're part and parcel of the sale item. They are not something which is that can be removed. Now, when it comes to things like a mafatih, okay, the question is, what is this? Is this part and parcel of uh, ittisal qarar, or is it part and parcel of the property? Okay. So they mention further appear المتصلة أغلاقها كضبة وكيلون ولو من فضة لا القفل لعدم اتصاله. So they mentioned, okay, if you have um, these keys, right, and they're attached with locks that come in. ضبة وكيلون, these were like their kind of locks that they would have. Even if it's from silver, they'll be included. لا القفل لعدم اتصاله. However, not the padlocks and these other things that come, because they are not attached to the property. So typically, they would have to be mentioned that you'll get the property with the padlocks. Again, this is down to urf as well at the time. What's included, what's not included is down to urf. But these were munfasil items, whereas the locks and today, nowadays, in those times, the padlocks and doors, these were things which were not part of the door. It was something which was attached. Nowadays, this is part of property, so urf is changed, and so these masail revolve purely around urf. Then they mention there's a discussion up here. The fuqaha also mention about sometimes some items are, even though they're munfasil and they're manqulat, sometimes because that they can only be used and benefited from with the actual property, then they become part and parcel of the property. It's as though they got qarar, as though they are muttasil, simply because they can't be used otherwise. Okay. So, for example, if you have a very small, like a calf, a newborn baby, right? Which it needs its mother, it's just a newborn. Independently, it's almost as though you can't do intifa of it. Therefore, whenever it's sold together with its mother. It's always deemed to be part of the mother at that very early stage. Therefore, although it's juz, it's a muttasil, it's manqul, it's something which is typically not deemed to be part of the mother now. But because the dependence, the intifa is so closely related to the parent, it's almost sold together. Again, that's part of urf. So how do you define all of this? It just depends on the industry and the sector and the asset itself, right? What asset is it? How is it used? How is it benefited from? How do people treat it? It'll be tested with urf. Then they mention والسلم المتصل والسرير والدرج المتصلة والرحى لو أسفلها مبنيا والبقرة للدلو والحبل ما لم يقل بمرافقها في بيعها أي الدار وكذا بستانها كما سيجيء في باب الاستحقاق. Okay. Then he also mentions ويدخل في بيع الحمام القدور لا القصاع وفي الحمار إكافه إن اشتراه من المزارعين وأهل القرى لا لو من الحمريين. And then he mentions وتدخل قلادته عرفا ويدخل ولد البقرة الرضيء في الأتان لا رضيئا أولا به يفتى وتدخل ثياب عبد وجارية أي كسوة مثلهما يعطيهما هذه أو غيرها لا حليها إلا إن سلمها وقبضها وسكت وتمامه في الصيرفية. Okay. So all of this section now is further discussion of what is included. So the stairs, beds, all these items, the furniture, depending on what furniture is, if it's muttasil, okay, if it's connected, then it'll be included. If it's not, and is deemed to be independent, like a bucket or ropes and these things, they will not be automatically part of the sale item unless you say bimarafiqiha, because the marafiq of a property includes these things and encompasses these things, right? Then he says, look, في بيعها فيدخل في البناء فيدخل البناء والمفاتيح والسلم المتصل والسرير والدرج المتصلة في بيعها أي في بيع الدار. Okay, وكذا بستانها. Likewise, the bustan, the garden, will come in. All of that again is based on urf, typically, but the principle the fuqaha are referring to, they've given us ideas, or these the usul al-bina of this bab. It comes down to three ideas. Number one, typically whatever the name incorporates, but again, that is based on urf, right? So the dar will incorporate all these things in their urf. So for us, whatever house or property incorporates, based on the understanding of urf, it'll be included in the sale item. The second idea was of this ittisal qarar. This is another way to, it's a way where people identify something to be part of something. And so what is ittisal qarar? Something which is long-term attached to an item. Again, urf will determine what that is and whether it's considered or not. Like zara, crops don't have ittisal qarar. And they are typically not, then because they don't have ittisal qarar, nobody deems that to be inherently part of the same item. And then number three is marafiq and huquq, which are purely dependent upon the understanding of the people and based on what those huquq are, right? So then he mentions many examples, like likewise a garden is typically included. Then he mentions when he's selling like a bath or something. Let's say you have a property, Bayul Hammam, which is like a public bath that people could use. Then there you have pots and pans, and you have all different things and utensils and different kind of accessories. Some accessories will be included, some will not be included. Again, it's based on over the understanding of people. What's like almost necessity and necessary to be included, understanding is urf. In himar, you're selling a donkey, its saddle will be included. Then look, this is a very interesting point that's discussed up here. Up here, there's a reference to the debate between urf am and urf khas. Up here, he says, look, if you're buying a himar with its saddle, or you've got a donkey, is the saddle included or not? Up here, he says, look, it just depends where you're buying that from. And this is indicating towards the concept of urf khas. In certain urf, it's included. In certain urf, it's not included. Therefore, there is a concept, because the concept of urf khas is debated among some fuqaha. But up here, there's a clear acceptance. Ibn Abidin, of course, is yeah, is a well, this is Haskafi discussing this, and Ibn Abidin will be discussing this also and supporting this in his commentary. But that's where Ibn Abidin rahimahullah, obviously being amongst the beneficiaries of the ulum of Imam Haskafi rahimahullah, he's also of this view of urf khas, which is discussed in his risala. So he mentions up here, Haskafi is mentioning that, look, if you buy a donkey, if you buy from muzari'in wa ahl al-qura, okay, you buy from them, then the ikaf and saddle is included. وَلَوْ مِنْ الْحِمَرِيِّينَ, if it's from these people, these himariyin people, who are basically those who trade purely in donkeys. That was their expertise, like donkey trading, right? Or is they'll be trading in these animals. Then typically they don't supply this. But other people, Ahlul Qura and these Muzari'in, who use donkeys, and it's like almost like it's domesticated donkeys almost, or donkeys which are like used day to day. Then with them, because it's normal for the animals to have a saddle, it was normal. They were kitted up and geared up to use. The saddle will always be sold with the donkey. It was the urf. such that you could claim a saddle for it, because the saddle was an additional item. Whereas the Himariyin, they wouldn't be riding the saddle, or the donkey. They wouldn't be using the donkey. The donkey would simply be like a car in a showroom, in a dealership. Nobody drives that. So it's usually has no insurance or anything. It has no no, it potentially would have very little petrol in it, or I mean, this I'm talking about our urf, of course, right? How things work. But if you've got a donkey which is being used and bought from people who don't trade in donkeys, that means they have donkeys generally for use purposes. When they're using the donkeys, then the saddle is assumed to be on them. And that was the urf, it would come with that. Therefore, if they sell it without the saddle, you can make a claim and demand that you are given the saddle. Whereas the traders in donkeys they don't have this concept or idea, because it doesn't come part and parcel. They are simply as traders. And so very rarely would you find them giving you a saddle. وتدخل قلادته عرفا, again it's قلادة is included عرفا. ويدخل ولد البقرة الرضيء في الأتان لا رضيا أولا به. We discussed this. Some animals are included with the parents, again based on urf. Then we talked about this next. It talks about where if you're selling a servant, what is included, then typically it's the clothing on them, or it's similar and the like. You can choose, either he gives what's upon them, or he can give something similar to them. It's because in urf, the kiswatul mithal is included. Whatever is the similar type of clothing, he can give that. Not, however, in urf, the huli, the jewelry of a jariya, is not included, and therefore it's not part and parcel of the sale. However, illa in sallamaha aw qabadaha wa sakata, except if he gave that, if he gave these items and the counterparty, he took qabd of it, okay, then and the seller didn't say anything, then that's deemed to be taslim, and so it's part and parcel of the sale item. Then he mentions up here ويدخل الشجر في بيع العرض بلا ذكر قيد للمسألتين فبالذكر أولى, right? Up here he mentions about how trees are included within the sale of lands, even if you don't mention it. And he says قيد للمسألتين, this قيد, this بلا ذكر, this restriction is what? And what is that qualifying? It's qualifying both the bina, the mas'ala of the bina, which he mentioned earlier, okay, and likewise up here he's mentioned the shajara, okay. So both things bila dhikrin. The bina is included bila dhikrin. Also, all that masala before that was discussed, the bina, and also the shajar. مثمرة كانت أو لا صغيرة أو كبيرة إلا اليابسة لأنها على شرف القلع فتح. So regardless of what the tree is like, if it has fruits, if it's fruit bearing or not fruit bearing, if it's small, if it's big, the size is irrelevant, has ittisal qarar, typically people assume and consider and deem this to be part of the sale item. There's an urf there, therefore it's included. Except for yabisa, except things which are like dry, dead, typically they need to be removed. Nobody sells them. And therefore you wouldn't expect that to be part of the sale item. You'd expect the seller to remove that and hand it over to you, but it's not deemed to be part of the sale item. When it's not part of the sale item, then of course the seller has to do the taslim of it without it being mashghul. That's part of qabd, the principles of qabd and taslim. So you'd expect the seller to remove that from the land and deliver that to you. And obviously that would be beneficial for the buyer, because then he's not, the property is not encumbered, or is not burdened with somebody else's asset. Then he says إذا كانت موضوعة فيها كالبناء للقرار فلو فيها صغار تقلع زمن ربيع إن من أصلها تدخل وإن من وجه الأرض لا إلا بالشرط وتمامه في شر الوهبانية. So up here then is further referring also to this same idea that of these trees, that if the tree is included in a manner for qarar, then it will be included. However, if it's something which is so small, again, this depends on the trees and what they are, and they are typically removed. Then no, unless you put a condition in. Then he mentions وفي القنية شرع كرما دخل الوثائق المشدودة على الأوتاد المنصوبة في الأرض وكذا الأعمدة المدفونة في الأرض التي عليها أغصان الكرم المسماة بأرض الخليل بركائز الكرم. This is just referring now, if you sell items or you're selling so you're selling things like a grapevine or an orchard of these and you have these like pegs and you have the nets and you have different like accessories attached to the land, poles and all the tools, apparatus, equipment that's required in an orchard of a grapevine. If they are typically part and parcel, then it'll be included, otherwise not. Okay. So he's saying, look, these things will naturally be included because it's deemed to be part of that. If you buy a grapevine or an orchard, all these equipment would be naturally included. He says, وفي النهر, okay, كل ما دخل تبعا لا يقابل شيء من الثمن لكونه كالوصف. Okay. وذكره المصنف في باب الاستحقاق قبيل السلم. This is the last masala for today, where he discusses and he mentions, and it's a beautiful principle, and it's something we've discussed earlier. The discussion of what is asl and what is wasf, what is maqsood, what is and what is wasf and awsaf. When we were discussing what incorporates the and what is in lieu of the thaman and what is not in lieu of thaman. So he mentions, we were talking about dhira earlier, if you remember. We spoke of how dhira classically was something which was not maqsood, and therefore it had no price against it. It wasn't singled out with a unit or with a price, and therefore it's tabi', and therefore if there's a different size or dhira given, you still have to pay the full amount, so on and so forth. Here is also mentioning whatever is taba'. So we discussed all these ideas of something being tabi'. Whatever is tabi', لا يقابله شيء من الثمن. Nothing of the price is equated to it or in lieu of it, because it's like wasf. So although it's part of the sale item, if it was missing, you can't deduct the price. You can't deduct the price because these things are included taba'an in the sale item and not sarahatan. Sarahatan is the price is in lieu of the saraha, unless you had specifically given these things a price, and of course you could change the price. And that's what the masla is, as we've discussed previously. So things which are tabi', they don't equate to price because it's tabi'. It's as though it's almost kal ma'dum. You can't give it something in lieu of it, because there's a level of jahala to some level, because it's urf, it's al-ma'ruf kal-mashrut, but it's not the same as being mashrut. The Tasrih is stronger than dalala, and therefore when you're equating the price will be specifically in lieu of what was musarrah in the contract, was clearly stipulated in the contract. Everything else is included, but it does not have a consideration. It's not in lieu of the price. Therefore, if that was missing, a person will still have to pay the full price, because that is based on urf. It's come from beyond the counterparties. Urf is imposed or is included based on the custom, whereas a contract is between two people. That is stronger than what is what has been incorporated in the contract based on urf. The tasrih is stronger, and so whatever is tasrih and mentioned in the contract, that will be the the price will be for that, because the price has been equaled and equated to that. There's no jahala in the thaman whatsoever. And that's one of the requirements in a sale. They can't be jahala in thaman. So if you had multiple, or if you had so many things included in urf, and they were all to be equated in the price, it'd create a niza. It could potentially create a niza, because the idea would be, the question mark would be, what's in lieu of what? How much? So if there's £100 and you got £100 and you have 10 things included, one explicitly and 9 things based on urf, then how do you determine what's for what? That's the issue that arises. So you make the £100 in lieu of the one item, which is clear. If that's missing, there's no £100. Whereas if you had 7 and 3 missing, the question would be how much? How much is each thing worth? That debate could arise. So something which is tabi' and taba'an it's not included in the price. And only that which is explicitly mentioned is against the price. Everything else comes without price. That has multiple benefits, as I just mentioned. There's a beautiful principle up here mentioned in by Ibn Abidin here. He discusses a principle that if you had something which was sold like a lock, you had a lock which was made of silver, and is sold as taba'an to the sale item, right? It's sold. You wouldn't have to worry about the ahkam of sarf here, right? Or if it's made of gold or silver, you wouldn't have to, or you had an element of silver in it or gold in it, you wouldn't have to worry about the ahkam of sarf, because it's tabi'. Because it's tabi', even the ruling of sarf is overlooked. It's as though the thing which is tabi' is kal ma'dum. It's a wasf. It's ma'dum in the contract. It's there. It's included. You can claim it. But when it comes to equating, when it comes to, from a legal perspective, when it comes to paying thaman and ensuring there's musawat in the contract, ensuring that the mabi is or the thaman is in lieu of the mabi and everything is there, you won't deem these things which are tabi'. It's completely overlooked insofar as thaman is concerned. It's completely not in lieu of the thaman. The only thing that's in lieu of the thaman is that which is explicitly mentioned in the contract. When that's the case, anything which could have potentially created riba, like these tabi' elements, and a piece of silver, a piece of gold in a lock or something, it's as though it's not there. It's not equated against anything. Therefore, there can be no riba. It's not equated against the thaman of the gold and silver on the other side of the, on the side of the thaman. When it's not equated, there's no need to balance or need to make sure that things are equal on either side, because it's not there in the first place. We're considering the silver and gold pieces in the locks and these additional items which are tabi' to be non-existent as far as the exchange is concerned. Yes, they're there as far as you having a claim. If it's tabi', it's included. But as far as the exchange and price and payment and the counter obligations of this exchange, the iwad and the mu'awad, then it's not part of the iwad or the mu'awad. That's what they're referring to, the fuqaha. Okay, so inshallah we'll stop here and we'll carry on from this وَلَا يَدْخُلُ الزَّرْعُ فِي بَيْعِ الْأَرْضِ بِلَا تَسْمِيَةٍ from here, because then it starts talking about shurut before moving on to the section of khiyar. So he'll just mention some things about conditions up here. Subhanallah bihamdihi subhanallah.